Ready?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so Walawani and Nidwan, my name is Alex King. I am the Sustainability Education Officer at the Eurobodalla Shire Council. I would like to acknowledge the Walbunja and Brinjiwan people of the Yuin Nation and pay my respects to their continuing care of country, land, sea and sky, and just want to honour them today. And extend my respect to any First Nations people who are joining us this evening. Perhaps it might be nice for anyone who's joining us off Yuin country today to write in the chat and perhaps introduce yourself and acknowledge where you're coming in from or zooming in from today as well. I want to acknowledge everyone that's here as well as a participant and someone who is interested in sustainable houses. I think it's an immense privilege to own a house, especially in this beautiful place we call the Eurobodalla, that we call home. And I thank you for being engaged as it shows that you're taking responsibility for the impact that that immense privilege has on our community, our environment, and our future as well. So I hope this evening is a source of inspiration and encouragement for you to continue along that path, whether you're building or retrofitting or renovating or whatever it is on your home. So Sustainable House Day is actually an event, a nationwide event organised by Renew, and it provides opportunity to explore some of Australia's most unique and inspiring homes and learn from people who have designed them, built them and live in them. So yeah, thank you for everyone who participated in yesterday's Sustainable House tour, whether you're on the bus or a drop-in. Alana told me that it was a wonderful day full of curiosity and wonder and peer-to-peer learning, and a few of those homeowners and other participants are here with us this evening as well. So if you didn't get a chance to make it along, thank you for coming now. I must also acknowledge that yesterday's tour and today's panel discussion is part of our Sustainable Choices project at Council, which has been funded by the New South Wales Stronger Country Communities Fund. So over the course of this year, we'll be running a series of workshops and discussions in the lead up to our main event, the Sustainable Choices Festival at Riverside Park on September 14th, 2024. Yeah, we hope to see you there. It's going to be much of discussions like this, workshops, store holders. So if you're even someone who's attending today that's interested in participating in that way, please get in touch. So all of this is guided by Eurobodalla Shire Council's Climate Action Plan, which is our roadmap to strengthening our resilience to climate change through mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to climate impacts. So mitigation is to reduce our demand of greenhouse gas emissions that are contributing to our warming atmosphere. And I'll have you know that if you look towards the slides, 29% of our LGA's emissions come from residential electricity usage. So yeah, when we're talking about sustainable houses and energy demands, that's going to play a huge part in achieving our net zero goals by 2050. Yes. And adaptation is basically to adapt our sediments to the impacts that it says may experience, but I prefer to say are experiencing in the Eurobodalla. So our increase in floods and fires and how we all adapt and live a prosperous life still. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to my lovely friend and colleague Deb to introduce the rest of our panel members tonight and lead the discussion. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, Alex and I'm having the pleasure of rubbing knees with Alex under the desk because we had computer sort of technical issues beforehand. So we're sharing a screen here. Thanks everyone so much for coming, and thanks for joining us. What I'm going to do is just give a brief overview and a few images of what a sustainable house, some of the different ways in which people envisage sustainable houses, because it's a very broad term, and a lot of us have we sort of have quite sort of quite visual ideas of what a sustainable house might be. And I just want to throw a range of those images on the table for us.
I have your images here.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, so can we go back to the
yeah.
one just before?
Of course.
Okay. So I would also like to acknowledge that we're coming from Yuin country. I live on Walbunja Yuin country. I grew up on Brinja Yuin country, and I'm sitting here with Alex today on Brinja Yuin country, having returned to the Eurobodalla after 40 years of living away. So it's really exciting for me to see sort of as somebody who was here as a kid and teenager in the 70s, when the bushies were building the mud brick houses up on the bush blocks without any reference to council whatsoever, and to sort of see where sort of the sustainable housing has come to in Eurobodalla. And having sort of lived and worked in a number of different places around Australia, it's really exciting to see how forward thinking, I grew up in 1970s, Maruya was like 1950s for the rest of the country. It wasn't a particularly forward thinking community. It was a very lovely, warm, generous community, but it was very much situated in the 1950s. And it's quite amazing to come back here and see, compared to the rest of the country, that we are really actually at the cutting edge of a whole lot of really important sustainability and environmental concerns. So it's a real thrill to be here for that. So I just want to, just sort of a formal definition of sustainability, which comes from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And they're talking about sustainable development. Now, I've taken this from the development discourse, because when we're building houses, development isn't just a term for the global south. It's a term when we put a development application in here to council. So development is very much a term that is relevant, although when it's put together with sustainability, it's often the thought is often that it's something from other parts of the world, but it's really important to think about the sustainable development goals in our part of the world. So sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's using what we can today without stuffing up the future for our children and our grandchildren. And what we've been doing in most Western countries, certainly post-World War II, but even before that, since the Industrial Revolution, is basically stuffing up the planet for our children and our grandchildren. And sustainable housing is one of the ways in which we can actually stop doing that and work towards a future that future generations can live in as well. A couple of really important pieces of knowledge and parts of the discourse from the 1970s and 1980s was the Club of Rome report, Limits to Growth, and the Brundtland, the book that came from the Brundtland report, Our Common Future. They're almost books that we've forgotten, but I'd really strongly recommend, if you're not familiar with those, coming back or introducing yourself to those, because they contain the core values of the sustainability movement. We knew about this in the 1970s, and unfortunately capitalism kind of won the debates for a long time. But the core values of sustainability are contained in wisdom that we had in the 1970s and 1980s.
Thank you. Thanks, Deb. I just want to acknowledge Gary that's just come online as well. Gary is our Director of Planning and Sustainability here at the Eurobodalla Shire Council. Hi, Gary. And he'll be here to answer any questions throughout the night as well that I can't answer.
Awesome.
Or anyone for that matter. So hi, Gary.
Hello.
Yeah, next one.
Where am I? There we go. Beautiful.
Okay, when we're talking about sustainable housing, And the panel will have other things to add from this. I'm just going to throw a few ideas in here about what we're thinking about when we're thinking about sustainability in housing, in the full knowledge that each of the panelists will be going, but she's missed this. So panelists, for the things that I've missed, bring them in when you're coming up. But when we're thinking about sustainability in housing, we're thinking about what materials are we using? Are they renewable? Are they repurposed materials? Have they been harvested and manufactured in a way that doesn't muck up the environment, that doesn't make it impossible for those materials to be resourced for future generations? We think about the supply chain. How far have our materials travelled? And sometimes, and Brent gave a brilliant example of this yesterday, about making decisions about resourcing materials for his build, where he eventually resourced them in Austria because that was actually going to be the most sustainable, ironically, and a little bit counterintuitively. Although they had to travel a long way, the manufacture, the harvest and manufacture method was way more sustainable than anything that was available in Australia. So often those decisions don't line up particularly well, and we sort of have to weigh up quite complex factors when we're looking at what is the most sustainable way of building something. We think about function, heating, cooling, and other energy uses, as Alex has mentioned. We look at inputs and outputs. What do we have to bring in to our building to make it a home? What are the waste products going out, and how are they being how are they being handled? Are they being handled in a way that's causing damage to the environment, or are they being handled in a way that protects our environment? We think about accessibility. And we think about durability and flexibility. A point that Susan made, Susan Rind in the Strawbale House yesterday, was building a house. It's one of the most energy intense things any of us will ever do. It takes a lot of energy to build a house. So we want to build it so that it's going to last. We don't want something that we're going to want to knock down in 30 years. We want something that's going to that we invest all of these resources in. We want it to really stand the test of time. And I think that's a really important issue in when we talk about sustainability, that's sometimes overlooked. About, is this going to last us for 40 years or 100 years? Are we going to be able to renovate it as our family situations change? If the house is sold, is it going to be able to serve the function for multiple different family structures? Can we do that easily without costing a lot of resources to repurpose? And when we're thinking about sustainability, we're thinking about the social aspects, the ethics and community. You cannot think, and I'm sure Steph will address this, you can't think about sustainable housing without thinking about the community in which your home, your family is situated. Thanks. So I just want to throw this term in, throw some images up for people who are interested in sustainable housing. If you want to sort of treat yourself, get a cup of your favourite or a glass of your favourite beverage and just type into Google vernacular architecture. If you haven't ever done that before, it will blow your mind. And vernacular architecture, it's a little bit of a lazy term, and apologies to the architects in the room, but it's a bit of a lazy term from architecture that basically means everything that wasn't designed by a Western architect. So it's sort of forms of housing from all over the world and from communities all over the world, and very much a sort of a non-Western flavour. And so it's a term that everything else has been sort of dumped into. But what you get when you look up images of vernacular housing are this amazing array of imaginative ways to house our bodies in. There's a lot of things that don't look like what we would think a house would be, and it allows us to start thinking outside of the box. So as well as most vernacular housing using very, very sustainable materials and building methods, there's also a whole lot of visuals that allow us to start thinking that we can use space and relate to the space that we live in some quite imaginative and beautiful ways. Thanks, Alex. So I'm just going to throw a few images up of some of the things that if we say sustainable housing, these are some of the methods that fall under that rubric. So we've got mud brick, which is sort of the one that in Australia is sort of seen as the, almost original one that resurfaced in the 70s. There's all sorts of ways of building with earth. We'll look at some images of rammed earth in a minute, but wattle and daub is another one. But mud brick's sort of your sort of sustainable house. When we look at no,
Oh, yeah.
go the bottle walls. I just threw this in just for a little bit of pretty. In the 70s and 80s, when you built a mud brick house, there was inevitably a bottle wall in it, and inevitably the contents of the bottles were emptied in the building of the mud brick house. It was sort of almost a tradition. But when you're using earth techniques, you can introduce some incredible beauty into them. And bottle walls is just one example. If you go exploring down that path, there's all sorts of really beautiful aesthetics that are associated with natural building. Strawbale, that's my particular passion, is strawbale. The joy of strawbale, they're beautiful, breathable houses. They're absolutely delightful to be in. They have those wonderful wide window sills that you can sit and enjoy the sun in. And they're made of a product that is otherwise a waste material. So in terms of sustainability, they really offer an enormous bang for their buck. And of course, we've got Paul Cook here, who's the Eurobodalla Strawbale wizard, to sort of talk about strawbale in our panel.
Did you want to do a cheeky plug for the Strawbale Association?
Oh, absolutely. So if you are interested in strawbale at all, Ausbale is the National Association for Strawbale. Both Stephanie Chiu, who's here today, and myself are on the National Committee for Strawbale Housing, Ausbale. And there's lots of resources if you want to Google Ausbale and have a look at that. Thank you. Earthships. This is sort of Earthships were developed, again, they're a 1980s thing. They came out of the Nevada desert, and the original idea was an earthship was to build houses completely out of repurposed materials. So the back wall, the far picture is tyres that are used to make the back supporting structure of an earthship. They're filled with earth and rammed and create really fabulous insulation. In the southern hemisphere, it's the north wall of an earthship that's the thermal mass or the mass of the used tyres. In our hemisphere, the north-facing side is then a glass house that pulls the sun in winter. And the two pictures in the middle there are both from the States, but we've got some fabulous earthships in Australia as well. Martin Freeney in South Australia is the earthship sort of maestro in Australia, and increasingly it's a technique that's being used here. Councils don't love them. Just saying that straight up. It's if you choose to go earthship, you really need to have lots of talks with your council beforehand, because they can be very, very difficult to get DAs for. Hopefully that will change over time, because they are probably the most sustainable of any of the building methods in terms of repurposing. Everything in an earthship, if it's a pure earthship, is repurposed material.
Sorry, we haven't gotten around to introducing our other panel members yet, but we do have certifiers and builders and architects here as well, who can kind of
answer some of those questions
related to our earthships and other modalities.
Yeah. Rammed earth is a more recent. Rammed earth is kind of like mud bricks, but let's not make the bricks. Let's just play with mud pies. And so rammed earth is often material taken from the building site. So one of the ways in which rammed earth is especially sustainable is that you're not paying transport costs, and you're actually using materials sort of gained on site. And rammed earth technology has just come in leaps and bounds over the last few years to, it used to be quite a messy and not necessarily an especially attractive way of building a house. But by adding oxides in, there's all sorts of amazing things that can be done in terms of the aesthetics of it, and it's becoming really quite a high-end product from being one of the cheapest and being seen as a very sort of low-end way of building. It's actually becoming quite high-end. Hemp, and this is our final slide for just different building materials. Hemp, there's an ironic situation. So industrial hemp has a very low THC content. It's very, very different to medical marijuana. It's and hemp is used for all sorts of amazing things. It's an extraordinary crop. It's used for clothing, and it's used has been used in building for many, many years. Increasingly, it's probably the sustainable material that's growing quickest in Australia in interest. Up until fairly recently, you couldn't. There wasn't a supply of industrial hemp in Australia. There weren't the people growing the crops. And so people wanting to build sustainable hemp houses were importing their product from France, which sort of took away a lot of the value, the sustainability value of them. But increasingly, farmers are jumping on board with hemp as a product, and it's an absolutely exploding building market in Australia at the moment.
Debbie and I had the pleasure of attending the Off-Grid Living Festival down in Chiltern, Victoria the other weekend, where they had hemp demonstrations. And I actually asked that question because I was of the belief that most of our hemp industry or hemp was being imported from overseas, and how that compromised the sustainability value of it. But they assured me, you know, supply in Australia is ramping up. So that's a winner. Is that the end of your slides for now?
That's the end of my slides for now.
Great. Beautiful. Shall we introduce the rest of our panel? Yeah. Would you like me to do it?
Why don't you do it? Yeah.
Gorgeous.
I've talked enough. Yeah.
Okay, so let me get around to everyone. We have Paul Cook first up, who is a resident of South Head Maria, a show house from yesterday's tour, and has spent many years using materials that he has found. And I guess I see you, Paul, as you know, a master of making beauty out of nothing. I've seen many of your houses, and yeah, just love what you do. So thanks for being here. We have Brendan Atkinson from PBA. He's our local certifier and is doing more training and getting more certificates in order to be able to certify, you know, more alternative methods of building. Is that right, Brendan? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. The standard construction methods are coming out of the deemed to satisfy area of the building code to certify anything that's outside the norm. We need to introduce performance solutions. So when I get my head around those and have a bit of spare time, I'm beginning to undertake that study at the moment. So hopefully by next year, we should be up and running in that regard, so we can take on all the more interesting jobs rather than the standard issue. Should be great, I think.
And I actually let out a little squeal of delight when when Alex told me that Brendan was actually in the area and available as a certifier, because one of the biggest, and this has been a real issue for strawbale houses in Eurobodalla, and I'm sure for other methods as well, but certification has actually been one of the biggest hurdles. So having a certifier who's on board with sustainable housing methods is such a win for Eurobodalla, and also, as Steph and I know, on a national level. There's many local government areas around Australia where, certainly in Strawbale, construction is being just held up, delayed. People are then choosing not to go with the method purely because they can't get the certification. handles
Really
it. It's such an important part of the process.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. Then we have Paul Dolphin from Paul Dolphin Designs in Malua Bay, and Steph Chiu, an architect from Maria, and Brent Dunn from Takt Studio for architecture in Congo. So lots of knowledge in the room. I guess what we're going to go through now is a few different pre-organized questions between the group. And then we're going to spend the last part of the session going through any questions that were submitted as part of the purchasing of tickets for the event, and open the floor for any questions that may need, to clarify anything we've spoken about throughout the evening. So, yeah.
Cool. So first of all, I'd like to ask our really exciting panel, what I want to ask you about is, what's your dream build or your dream project? In an ideal world where you had absolutely no constraints, the funding fairy came and sort of tapped you on the shoulder. You had no time constraints. There was nothing that could get in the way of you doing your absolute dream ideal build. And just big overview, just 3 to 4 minutes from everybody about what your absolute dream build or your dream project would be. Paul Dolphin, can we kick off with you?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. Can I start that by being a little bit facetious and say that we actually named our house Drömhus, which means dream house in Swedish. So we've sort of done that. We are building our sustainable house, and having it approved and getting it constructed and living in it is a dream. Living in a solar passive house, living in a low energy house, living in a zero carbon house is a dream. My dream home or my dream project would be that sustainable design was available for everyone. I would like it if it wasn't something alternative, if it was just the norm, because it's a funny way that we talk about it. It's, we're still, or houses are still being provided for people that haven't caught up with the needs and the technology that's available. It's a little bit like people going down to the shop and buying an iPhone and getting it home and realizing that it's got a film camera in it and you've got to plug it in, to use it. It's, we don't, if you want a phone, you get the latest product. If you want a car, you get the latest product. If you go down to a project home builder, they will give you a product that was suitable 50 years. Well, it wasn't even suitable 50 years ago, but they're still giving you an old-fashioned product. I would like it if sustainability was the mainstream and the ordinary. And I think we can do that by changing the language of sustainability a little bit to some of those things you talked about in your slides, which is the social sustainability and the economic sustainability. So, an affordable home, which is low cost home, low energy home, resilient homes that survive through fires and that sort of stuff, and just a little simple thing, placing the windows. If you take all your windows from all around the house and you place the majority of them facing north, that can save you 60% on your energy bills. No change of materials, no change of anything. So it's easy for Brendan to certify. It's easy for Gary to approve. There's nothing. All we've done is taking a little bit of design, and things like that should be available for everyone, really. It should be common knowledge.
Awesome.
So that will be my dream.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Brent, do you want to follow that?
You've done well, Paul. You've summarised pretty much my thoughts on things. What I would like to say is, hello, Deb. It is that I would like to actually take the contrarian view to this, because I think having something without constraints is completely the antithesis of sustainability. So sustainability to me and our practice is an underlying I guess, a baseline. The planet's limited. We have limited resources, and we've got an ever-increasing population. So, to sort of say, is your dream house something that has no constraints? I sort of think, well, actually, that's kind of a nightmare. I think that the important thing is that we start to acknowledge those constraints. We start to work with what is common to all of us. We're all human. We all got 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, and we all breathe air. We all breathe the same air. We all drink the same water. All those things that Paul was talking about with, solar passive design. These are things, and in all of your examples and things, things, earthships. These vernacular building systems and materials are all things that humans are familiar with for generations. And I think the big thing is that we need to be able to remember that our homes aren't just shelter from the elements. They're also about connectedness. They're also about trying to connect us to the elements so we can enjoy them, because it's no benefit to anybody to have a home that's the same temperature all year round and you stay in that all year round, because there's nothing more delightful than a cool, shady overhang on a bushwalk when you're sweating in 30-degree days. It's all about context. It's all about contrasts, and it's all about, embracing that human condition that we all share. So I think, Paul, really what you're talking about is absolutely critical. There's some small but important changes we can make that really will make a massive difference to the sort of the resources our buildings are utilising.
Awesome, Brent. Thank you. Paul Cook. Paul, you're muted.
There you go.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks again for having us. Yeah, I like what people have been saying. It's not necessarily about the grand design and the huge thing, but about building to the resources and the limitations of that. And I suppose as a dream build, I've been thinking a little bit about, I've done a little bit of Strawbale, and it's good to use different materials in different areas to come up with those solutions that are site specific and relevant to the local area and all those sort of things. But cement production is like 8% of global warming just in cement production. So not construction, but just in cement. So I've been playing with reducing cement in walls for some earth construction, and there's debate about the pyramids and things like that, how much of that's poured earth and how much is actually cut stone. And so with that, we can create block work and walls with systems that are well accepted and well used, whether it's formwork for concrete or those sort of things. So some sort of construction system that uses those existing things so we can have earth construction more mainstream. So I've been playing with poured earth and reducing the amount of cement that you might use and using clay binders rather than that. And around the world, there's a bit of work on that sort of thing. And I've watched a bit of French stuff and had a play at home. But the breathability of earth you can use with timber construction. You can embed timber in that. You can make timber structures more fire resistant with fire rated walls with earth. And so poured earth is kind of my dream build at the moment, as well as straw bale. For insulated walls, Strawbale is really useful, but for a thermal mass benefit internally, poured earth you can construct with similar or less amounts of cement than rammed earth, and with a lot less effort. You can pump it, so you could pump it into a formed wall, similar to cement.
Paul, is now the time that I share your photos, by the way?
Oh no, I'll talk about that with the reality project, because
okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, just checking.
Yeah, no, so that was just what I was going to talk about as far as a dream build, and simple size and design and those limitations on cost and those things that are worthwhile. But I've done a few walls with just clay as the binder, and I will like to have extra time for that to dry, because 3 months later, it still dries without a binder in it. But anyway, so that is basically the sort of dreamy build I've been playing with at the moment. Yeah.
Awesome. I've had the pleasure of seeing Paul's house a couple of different times, and it's just like walking into a magician's den. You're always doing something sort of extraordinary that's really outside of the box, and I love the poured earth thing. It's just such a lovely way of working with such an important material. Cool.
Thanks.
Steph, tell us about your dream.
Well, Ani all. I love what everyone said. I'm really interested in like the human condition and our relationship with everything. So my dream is for all people to thrive in deep connection with themselves and to this place, because it gives us air and it feeds us, it nourishes us, and for us to thrive in community with all beings, so not just with humans, and for all beings to have a home, not just like today, not just for us, but for 7 generations, like way beyond us. People have touched on how our homes are a part of a bigger system, and this topic is a huge topic because it reflects, who we are, what we like as physical beings, and how we feel and relate to our environment, what we dream of, and our values. So I don't have a project, but I have like all these what ifs. And so I've just, what if in the Eurobodalla we sourced all our materials right here, and for there to be enough for everyone? What if in the Eurobodalla every generation planted trees for timber for the next generation? What if in the Eurobodalla we turned some of our oyster shells into lime for building? What if we turned our wool from sheep into insulation? I don't know. What if, I think it's done in Europe, what if in the Eurobodalla we didn't flush our toilets with our drinking water and we dealt with our waste differently? What if each suburban street had a microgrid? What if we revived our secondhand material shop and every building being demolished was taken apart carefully and then put back into that shop, or like revived or recycled? What if we didn't need any spare rooms anymore, but we had a fleet of transportable like rooms that you could hire affordably when a friend came over? And what if those transportable rooms also had a dual purpose of being a home for people in times of crisis? Or what if the fleet was made up of stuff from the council pickup? What if there was a free service where building designers, builders, architects worked with people to resolve their design problems with the least amount of material? Very small intervention. And what if all our houses were designed to be easily converted into 2 houses when living situations changed, family size decreases, or our child's family moves in, and that could be easily accommodated? So that's kind of some what ifs.
Wow. Gary, just putting you on notice, we'll come back to get a response to you from some of those things of Steph. Steph, thank you. What a fabulous dream list.
Can I just say, Steph, you've got my vote.
I'm running her campaign. I've already put my hand up for that. That's awesome. Brendan, follow that.
Pretty hard to beat that one. Well done, Steph. That's fantastic to see some real insight there. Initially, you might think that, that's all just stuff of dreams, but that's where it all starts, doesn't it? You've got to have the idea for things to move from there. But I'm going to take the question a bit more literally. And you said at the start, Deb, that you could wave your magic fairy wand and have as much money as you like. So I'm going to go straight up.
There it's
Passive
waved.
design. Yeah, okay. Passive design, of course, incorporating all those principles of natural light, ventilation and thermal comfort, and then of energy efficient appliances and lighting, high performance insulation, air sealing, weatherization, all that sort of stuff, followed by, of course, water efficiency, fixtures, appliance, recycled as much as possible, eco-friendly materials. It goes on and on, doesn't it? But I think that's the dream with there's no money, but that's not the practical reality. I think Paul touched on it earlier, Paul Dolphin, about there's small things that we can do right at that early design stage. So just orientating your house slightly a bit more to the north if there's constraints on your block, which there always are. But there's people like Paul that are up to date with these small nuances that can, you know, at least make significant increases to your energy efficiency of your home with minimal change. We are at the moment very much on tram tracks. The general construction is built the same way. It's just so sort of processed stuff. And to get out of that, it's pretty tricky because the laws don't allow it for a start, or they do, but it's, as you alluded to earlier, you've got to find just the right people to get these ideas through. I would say as a small dream, as maybe an achievable dream, I would go back to simply allowing all light colours to be put on roof in the Eurobodalla instead of having a simple restriction that comes out in every DA that says, oh no, we don't want light colours. I think that's probably about the easiest way we can inject sustainability into these homes that are getting built at the moment. So that's something I'd sort of be barking for at the moment. But yeah, that's me. But everyone, incredible suggestions. And yeah, well done, guys. Good stuff.
That's awesome, Brendan. Thank you. I love the big vision and the big dreaming is so important. It's also so important to identify and recognise the low-hanging fruit, and that thing of there's, you know, changing that constraint around the roof colour. That's a very low-hanging fruit that should be, and maybe we might be able to hear from Alex and Gary in a minute as to why that might not be ready to harvest or ready to pick, but it might well be.
You can get close to the lightest colours, but you can get close to those lightest colours, which, you know, that's good. But anyway,
yeah,
good work.
Thank you. So, Brendan, I'm going to get you to keep going, if you will. So the next question that I've got for the panel is, I've asked everybody to think about giving us a description of a past or a current or a future or a possible build that is a realistic one in the real world, given constraints that are there. So rather than the dreaming the big picture, describe something that has happened in the real world for you.
Yeah. We've got a project on at the moment which is being constructed from hemp block, which is pretty interesting. It's actually hollow core. It's like your old Besser block, but it's obviously made of hemp. And there are reinforcement rods placed down the middle, and then it's core filled with a hemp, and it's got a little bit of cement in it to, you know, increase the structural stability of it. But it's once again, for me to be able to certify that, it can only be like an infill panel. It can't be load bearing, so it's infill panels inside a structural steel frame. But it's a couple that have moved down from Sydney recently, and you know, they're spending their weekends chipping away at it, trying to do it as carefully and efficiently as they can, trying not to involve external labour costs. Or now, it was a good point someone raised before about the hemp block being sourced from overseas. I'm not sure where this one comes from, but it's a ripper. I'm getting around it in regards to legislation with requiring a metal colour bond skin go over the top of it, which really seems pretty counterintuitive, doesn't it? When the hemp block's already got the fire rating, that's all there. It's just, it all comes down to this deem to satisfy and performance solution, two branches of the building code. So, you know, got to get those a bit closer together, I think.
Fabulous example.
Yeah,
that's the one out near the anchorage.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. I got really excited. I think Paul told us about that. And was I
Yep.
with you, Steph? And we went round and
It was
we got,
me.
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Alex and I was sort of, oh my God, we've got him here. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's actually how we
Yeah.
first found out about you, Brendan, because your name was on
Yeah,
the
your sign was
fence.
on the, yeah.
Paul was digging the foundations when I first popped around there. So yeah, I've known Paul for a fair while. Out of all the panelists, he's the guy I know, and for a long time he's been an inspiration to me in regards to all the things he's not just talking about. Paul's the guy that does it. Do you know what I mean? So it's just really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. Good on you, mate.
Oh, thanks, Brendan.
So that's a beautiful segue over to you, Paul. Do you want Alex to bring your slides up?
Oh, yeah, that'd be good. Thanks.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
remember what I was going to talk about.
give me 2 seconds. I'm working across 3 screens
But
at the moment. So-
Basically, I'm building a shed, and with the the fires we had and thing, I worked for the rural fire service for a while there too, and I was conscious about all the sheds I saw burnt down, and talking to people about all the things they lost in their sheds. You know, the $60,000 wine collection, or the antique motorbikes, or whatever, after the fires in 2019. And so I wanted a really good shed that's not going to burn down.
For your wine
Anyway.
collection.
I wish I had the wine collection wouldn't last. So that'd be it'd be gone before the shed was built. Anyway, I've got some photos here that show. So I've been using poured earth, and so it's local clays and decomposed granite basically. And I've been doing a few different mixes. It's all it's infill panels. They're not structural in terms of the load, the roof and things. So the poured earth can work well with timber, and so the roof and everything supported posted beam. But this is some of the look of the poured earth. You can get all sorts of different surfaces I've found, and you could do some really creative and interesting things. You could sculpt it when it's freshly out of the panels, and you can see up here there's like a brick section where I just tried to make it look like a sandstone brick, and it took a few minutes. And you can see where I've been pouring it there. I've sort of been trying to, I suppose, industrialize it a little bit to make it easier and quicker to build. So I can mix about half a cubic meter and pour it in at the time. And I've also experimented with putting a partition in the wall, so you can pour different densities. One of the limitations of mud brick with natters and things, particularly in Victoria, was the energy requirements and the R rating values. New South Wales isn't so bad with basics. We can build mud brick and rammed earth and not have to have an internal insulation in the middle of it. But this poured earth gives you the opportunity to add that insulation in the middle of the wall, and so you can get an R2 wall that's got a lot of thermal mass fairly easily. And I don't think it looks as good as rammed earth, but it's a clay sort of nice finish that can look good in all sorts of different ways. But anyway, there's a few photos of it that I thought I'd share. I've tried different mixes, and I've added cement to a lot of some of the mixes, but more lime. Trying to use lime instead of cement, as it's environmentally much more sound. It uses carbon dioxide to set, so it's taking carbon out of the atmosphere. Plus, it's manufactured at about half the temperature of cement, so it's a good product and works with clay. So you're using that natural binder a bit more. You can see on that build, you can see this low down section, you can see the slightly different color. That's a less density material. So if you can build it down to about under 1,000 kilo per square meter. So that helps give you some R value to the wall. And then you can also build over to similar densities to what rammed earth is, and probably similar strengths, but I'm not relying on the strength because I've got post and beam construction. But you probably could with some engineering detail. And pouring it wet, unlike rammed earth, you have issues with cracking and things, so you can put in lots of construction joints to counteract that. But the additives like lime and cement. I've tried cement-free walls, just straight clay. They take over 3 months to dry, which is a bit of a limitation, but the formwork's cheap, so it's still doable, but you've got to work on having that wall breathable so that it'll dry quickly when you pull the form off and not fall over. But once it's dry, it's very strong. The clays in my tests, bricks and things, are probably some of the stronger mixes. Anyway, that's one of the project I've been playing around with. So
awesome, thank you. And I think that it's sort of the discussions around trying to use increasing proportions of lime and decreasing amounts of cement is a really important one. And it's something, you know, I think both, I've had discussions with both Alex and Steph around, we have so many oyster shells in the Eurobodalla, which can be converted into lime. And that's another bit of a low-hanging fruit that we've actually got locally that we could be using our resources in that way. Possibly, I don't know the technicalities of that, but that's something I'd be really interested in us exploring at some stage.
Little plug for the Narooma Oyster Festival. I'll be leading the Zero Heroes, the waste management crew there in a few weeks, and we actually divert all of the oyster shells. Last year we diverted over 700 kilos. So who knows, in the future we may have a collab between the building people and the Narooma Oyster Festival.
Yeah. Yeah, and Steph sort of put me on to a whole lot of the potential around that we've got lime sitting on our doorstep, should we choose to use it. Awesome. Brent, can we go over to you?
Sure. I've been so involved in engrossed in it, Paul. It's absolutely beautiful product. I look to coming to visit it soon.
it'd be good to have a look.
I mean, it brings to mind some of the beautiful rammed earth or earthen walls in Rowangi, the temples in Japan, throughout Kyoto and things. And, you know, these are things that have lasted for, you know, thousands of years. And they're things that we kind of tend to forget about. I think what's interesting about the kind of materials that we're talking about here is the fact that, you know, a lot of the building industry has been, you know, very often concerned with the sort of the I want a low maintenance house. I want a low, you know, they want materials. A lot of people are wanting materials that don't age, materials that will stay the same. But unfortunately, I think there actually aren't that many. And we've just seen the Caesar stone type bench tops, you know, is one of the sort of the non-aging products. We've seen the problems with those sorts of things. And I think that there's something to be said for embracing that, the materials that so that they age gracefully, and understanding a little bit more about that in, you know, in many instances in Southeast Asia, in Bali, there's temple complexes that are built with materials that are, you know, they'll only last for 20 or 30 years, but then they're rebuilding next door the same temple again. And so this sort of the knowledge and the skills of the carpentry teams and the craftsmanship gets built into the community, becomes part of the way of life in places like that. And I think we do have to reassess, in, you know, given the constraints currently and the things that are happening in the environment at the moment, we do have to reassess each choice. So with that, sorry, a bit of a sidetrack, but I think you asked about what a project that we're working on. I think it's probably relevant to talk about our home here at Congo. We've just put together, or we're partway through putting together a CLT build in Congo, which is a cross-laminated timber build. We've been looking at methods of prefabrication in our practice for a number of years, and this is you know, so we've tried frame building with clad exteriors, built in the workshop, all sorts of things to try and economize building, all sorts of things to make them more sustainable, more careful, more importantly with a greater longevity. We've had a focus on small builds because I think one of the most sustainable things we can do, we had a good discussion about this yesterday in the tour, is we can all reassess what it is that we need in order to live. You know, in the 60s, the average Australian house is 100 square meters. Now it's 232. And that's just, you know, we haven't gotten that much bigger as people, in my view. So I think with our build, we've sort of cooked it down to 120 square meters, and then we've got a 40 square meter studio, which interestingly, Gary, we have got a condition on our DA saying we can't use that as a secondary dwelling unless we get another DA. And I find that what Steph was talking about before, there needs to be a flexibility around what our homes can be used for into the future, because that sort of, you know, we're all looking for, you know, affordable housing options now. Well, sharing is one of the most affordable ways that we can, you know, increase density without even changing what we've got. So yes, we've actually, as Deb alluded to, the build, we spent many years camping here originally, and then we were in Wollongong, and we needed a methodology that was prefabricated in order to get it moving quickly enough for us to make a transition, because our work started to come online down in Cobargo and the bushfire rebuilds. And so we opted for CLT, which we did try and source from Australia.
What is CLT, Brent?
CLT is the cross-laminated timber. So it's a solid timber structure house. The floor doesn't have any joists. It's like a massive scale plywood. The floor, walls, and ceiling. It's made of spruce, and we ended up going with a company in Austria and brought it over. Now, that was a bit of a shock to us to realize that there was actually another option across the ocean that was in fact going to still give us a negative carbon footprint in the installed product. So it took a bit of a head change for that to realize. But I think where we're, you know, the benefits of that it was a swift build, went up in 3 days, and then we've just been working on it. The accuracy, the tolerances, the structural system, it's incredibly structurally efficient, and it's given us a wonderfully comfortable place to live. You know, it's got actually a thermal mass to it, which we were surprised at. It's not a tremendously high R value, but it's very easy to add another layer of insulation on the outside of it. And so, yeah, that's been a delight to build. And then with recycled hardwood windows and doors, it's a timber box that we enjoy living in with a great timbre. It's got a great sound. It's got a great feel. And I think hopefully it can spark a bit of discussion for the Australian industry as well.
That's awesome, Brent.
Can I ask a quick question, Brent? Is that cross-laminated timber come in is it like a sandwich panel? Is there a different material in between, or you've got two sort of outside sections?
So the floor is 140 mils thick spruce, and that's in 5 layers, and it's solid all the way through. Also 90 mil thick, and they're 3 layers, and then the ceiling is 120. I think it's in 3 layers.
Right. Oh, I'd like to look into that one. That sounds
You're
pretty
more
cool.
than welcome.
It's awesome. There's a lot of what you just spoke about, Brent, that I think speaks to Steph's visions. So we might segue now from architect to architect. Go from Brent to Steph.
Before I forget, there was a little Japanese discussion going on, and also the use of materials that don't last as long. I think there's something in there that needs to be considered. Like we talk about longevity, but in some places, materials for, like in Bali or in Indo, bamboo grows rapidly, and they replace their buildings quite often because bamboo deteriorates, but the traditions continue.
Right,
yeah, and it's right there, and so that is the most sustainable thing for them, and it's beautiful. And in terms of Japan, I went to this place where they completely deconstructed this really hundreds of years old house, and they packed it up and took it to this other place and reconstructed it all, and we see that in Australia, where people put houses on tilt trays and and gets them shipped and puts it onto another piece of land. So there's really creative ways of reusing without having to demolish, and yeah, questions on materials. In terms of a real world project, I want to shine a light on 2 projects that aren't mine. I think they showcase collective creativity that make a good dent in issues of sustainability. And like, I am a young person and I find it hard in this housing crisis in terms of buying land and things like that. So that's my context. So these projects kind of speak to that. How does everyone, including people who can't afford the market, have a home? And so the first project is in Melbourne. I know it's a city context, but they have great sustainability principles. It's called Nightingale, and the group of architects, they were trying to challenge, or they were fed up with how they couldn't make a dent as architects in a profit-driven developer world. And so they became non-for-profit developers. And so as architects, they knew how to, reduce. So this idea of reductionism, reduce everything to its bare minimum, or like, it's still beautiful and still comfortable, make the bare minimum beautiful and livable, to try and, as a way of reducing cost and reducing energy and things like that. And then in terms of the social aspect, bringing in community housing providers, making relationships with them, embedding into the developer model, 20% going to community housing providers for them to rent it out to their clients, 20% going to first line providers like nurses and teachers, and then using a ballot system and having priorities set out. So for the most vulnerable people, single women, single parents and things like that. And but still, so I think their cheapest apartment, 1-bedroom apartment, is maybe like $250,000. And also first home owners. So their smallest, cheapest apartment is $250,000, which is kind of like unheard of.
It's unheard of in Melbourne. So
in Melbourne, yeah. So I think it takes risk to do something great and to do something sustainable. But sustainable is also, you don't have to take huge risks. You can do it very easily in a home. But in terms of the larger issue of housing crisis, it took a group of architects to challenge the norm. And I just wanted to put out there, they talk about the triple bottom line. So people, planet, and profit. So that's a sustainability framework, which I think also this next project kind of works in as well. It's the Community Land Trust Group in the Blue Mountains. And so they haven't produced anything. They're just a group of people living in the Blue Mountains affected by the housing crisis, people who've lived there for a long time, or people there who can't enter or been kicked out because of price rises and COVID changing the whole face of people living outside of the inner city. So community land trusts, for those who don't know, they're a form of shared ownership of a property, and it's stuck in perpetuity, so it can't be sold off. And the group forms a non-for-profit organization, and they decide how that land and the buildings are used. So the way it's affordable and sustainable for the community is, say the laundromat, there's no laundromats, and they decide, oh, we should put a laundromat in. So they have the ability to do that. Or housing is a really big problem. Let's put some houses on there. And because the land is held in perpetuity, they don't have to pay for the land. They just pay for the building. And so, it's sustaining a community, and which is pretty cool. So the group right now is dreaming and envisioning what that could look like in the Blue Mountains. And the cool thing is that when you're an individual, you might not have the means or the funds to purchase, but collectively, people coming together with their money have the ability to do that. So I just wanted to.
And I think a really important part of sustainability, of that ongoing sustainability, there's so many interesting ideas that are coming out of intentional communities like that, and that's almost a whole other discussion.
Which is happening.
It's happening next Saturday at Red Door at 2:30. For people who are interested, there's a group who are looking at an intentional community type situation and getting discussions going with that.
Is that an informal group, Deb, or is it yourself?
No, I'm going, but I'm not
Okay.
one of the organisers of that. But I think it is open to anybody who's interested, so I can shoot you the details on that.
Perfect.
Yeah. Paul, can you bring us home on this real world?
So yeah, real world. There's been a lot of talk tonight about, and your slides have shown various alternative methods of construction. When I first got interested in this field when I was in my early 20s, I was very, very deep eco. I believed that we should use as many alternative methods as we could. And then when I left university, I became a building surveyor, which in England meant going and looking at buildings and identifying defects. And I surveyed over 5,000 houses, a couple of thousand schools and hospitals. And what I realized was that where the defects generally occur is where a material has been used without forethought of the implications of that. So, for example, there was a red ash in an area where in the Midlands where I was working. Now it's actually, it sounds like timber. It's not. It's actually slag from a nearby works, and they were using that in the slab, the concrete slab. The problem was that over time it actually separated and sort of like flaky pastry. So these people who own these houses now couldn't sell them or couldn't get a mortgage on them. And I suppose, you know, and that's where our regulations might be clunky and they might not respond quickly to the housing crisis, as Steph mentions, or the material, you know, the poured earth that the Paul's using. But they are there to protect us. All the rules in their best intention is to protect us. So I realized, you know, instead of trying to fight that, can we work within that, I suppose? And so that's how I look at my design work, is like, you know, in first and foremost, we have a climate crisis, and we have these rules that we are given at the moment. Can we work within those to get sustainable outcomes? And then, you know, in parallel with that, can we have pioneers like Paul, you know, pushing the building envelope and getting those things certified and then getting them into the mainstream? And at the same time, you know, I think Margaret Thatcher actually said it, you know, she actually, although I am the least big Margaret Thatcher fan, she actually was talking about the market economy, and we actually have a choice as to where we spend our money. So, you know, we can drive change through purchasing power. So we can drive change through buying zero formaldehyde insulation, by going to Bunnings and asking for this, by asking the suppliers, and driving change through purchasing, driving through change through innovation, and driving change through pressuring legislation.
Through regulation.
Yeah, but you know, to then go back to an example of a project we've done, we actually did a home for it was a secondary home on a farm in Maruya, and he was a very traditional old school farmer, and he let us do what we wanted to do. And so we designed him a solar passive house using conventional materials, colorbond cladding, steel frame, everything. And just the fact that every time he stops me and sees me, he goes, "I cannot believe we don't need to heat or cool this house. I cannot believe it. I can't believe how you did it." I can only do a northern version of Maruya farmer. I can't do it genuine, but you know, in his strong Australian accent and his old school ways, he cannot believe that we designed this house that he doesn't have to heat or cool. You know,
His
so I
mate
suppose-
can't believe what you did there.
there
Awesome.
you go, there you go. So that's, you know, that's the hearts and minds, I suppose, you know, like that for me is that, again, that you know, making it happen.
Beautiful, Paul. Thank you. That gives us a lovely segue to Gary. If I can just throw the mic open to you, Gary. So there's a lot of issues being raised here around that the tension and the how we navigate doing things as sustainably as possible within a sometimes quite clunky regulatory environment that's there to keep us safe. Do you want to respond to any of that? We don't have enormous amounts of time, but I'd love the overview response to that.
Yeah, look, there's probably, I've written a few points down, and firstly, I think, following on from what Paul was saying, I think legislation and regulations they are clunky, and they've been around, and they're there for a purpose, to make us safe and to keep the building up and all those sorts of normal things. But and I don't think, probably going back to the first things about talking about what was it, mud brick houses and things like that. There's, like Brendan said, the BCA is also a very clunky piece of code, whatever you want to call it, and it has specific obligations in terms of making us safe and keeping the buildings up. And so meeting those requirements, and it's not just it's even bigger than what Brendan was saying in terms of deemed to satisfy and performance standards. You've actually got to, if you want to use a new material, you've got to get it tested. You've got to get it tested in accordance with an Australian standard. And there's all these things you've got to do. And it's not perfect, but it is there for a reason too. So I think there's a bit of a mix in all the things that we've been saying, is trying to keep pushing towards a better outcome, and we will get there. It does take time, though, is the problem, I suppose. That was the first thing I was going to say. I think there was a lot of Stephanie raised a few things about, well, what I got out of it was waste. One of the other things that councils struggle with is getting comments from people or submissions about things when we go out. So this year we're going to go out with our waste strategy. And one of the big ticket items is, well, trying to reduce waste, because there's a whole lot of principles around reducing and reusing, recycling, all those sorts of things, but it actually costs a lot of money to build tips. So there's a benefit for everyone if we can reduce the amount of waste that we consume and send to our waste tips at this point in time. So when the waste strategy does go out on exhibition, it'd be good to get people like yourselves to have a say and say what you want to see happen in the future.
Thanks, Gary. Oh, sorry.
I've got two more little things. Yeah, I just noticed there's a little discussion about secondary dwellings, and actually yesterday or today I've been in Canberra, and I've been in a few different places, and I can't actually remember where I saw it, but I think I just Googled it while you were talking, and I think Victoria, so the state government's actually came out, and I don't have a lot of detail, but they're making or seeking to make secondary dwellings exempt, so you don't need to get approval for them. So that's some of the things that we need. Like, you could set up setbacks. You know, you're talking about a smaller building. It's up to 60 square meters in your backyard. If you're connected to water and sewer, if you're obviously in a reticulated location, and you can achieve whatever setbacks need to be achieved, and you comply with the BCA, then it should really be something you don't need to get approval for. Like, if you're 2 or 3 meters away from your neighbour's boundary, they're not really going to care that much. So, or most times they won't. So that there are changes happening. I think we need to keep our eyes out for those changes and looking at different jurisdictions, like what Victoria is doing in that case, and whether we can apply that to New South Wales as well. There was one, and just sorry to finish off, I think there's a bit of discussion about what you wanted to see happen in the future. And like, there's a lot of building designers and architects here. I would like to see subdivisions, and that's another big beast of a thing to move around. But, many years ago, I went to Blacktown when I was in the Central West, working in the Central West, and Sydney Water was already using grey water instead of just your normal reticulated water in your sewer. They were finding another way to use other bits of water, and so I think I would like to see that happening in the Eurobodalla, is that we have a grey water system. And I've always found stormwater to be a funny thing. Water's so precious, but we just let it run away. There's got to be better ways to keep water and make sure we can use water for forever. That's all that's a few things I thought of while you were talking today.
Awesome.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
I just want to butt in here as well, because someone mentioned about the dark roof thing as well, and I know it came out in a wonderful article summarized by Shasa in their most recent newsletter, and it kind of relates to one of the questions that was sent through as part of the session that asked retrofitting to an existing home to improve heating, cooling, and energy efficiency. So the article summarized a paper that came out of UNSW in Sydney, the School of Built Environment, which said your dark roofs can cost almost $700 extra a year in electricity. And I wish I could pull it up on the screen right now, but there's a thermal imagery of a street with light roofs and dark roofs, and you know, the color difference, the red on the dark and the blue on the light roofs is incredible. Gary, did you want to speak to that? Because in the article that Shasa put together, they mentioned that the New South Wales Planning Minister, Paul Scully, has now paused upgrades to our state's sustainability building standards, which would have encouraged light coloured roofs. Do you know much about that, and can you talk to it at all?
Yes, I was. Sorry, that was the other thing I was going to quickly mention. Look, two things there. One is Basics still. So Basics was updated October last year, and there is a bigger push for lighter coloured roofs. Problem, I suppose, in the Eurobodalla is our DCP, or our development control plan, the residential zones one, still talks about having the opposite situation of not having really light coloured roofs, because that's from a glare issue. So as councils and as planning authorities, we approve things, but we also have to deal with complaints and about reflection and all that sort of stuff. So, but it is, so that's why the standard is there, reflectivity. But we have known for some time that we need to update that, and there needs to be some sort of compromise or mix in terms of how we actually deal with that, so that you don't get the reflectivity issues, but we allow a lighter, and we do allow a lighter coloured roofs. It's really just zinc's probably one of the main issues because it doesn't dull that much. But it is, we are looking at reviewing the DCP later this year, and that's one of the things that we will be definitely looking at.
Gotcha.
That's good,
Thank you.
because the precedent's already been set through the Shire. You only have to look around to see that they're dotted all over the place anyway. So
Yeah.
Mm.
And if the other thing is, if you do a complying development dwelling house, like through the state controls, you don't have to abide by council's DCP. So you can have a light coloured roof, or, you know, I think there's a specific colour in the condition. I can't remember what it is. The
solar absorption rating at 0.04.
Yeah, no, but there's zinc, and there's a ColourBond colour, and may have changed its name now. That's really white. What's that? Whatever the colour is.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not surf mist, is it? Could be surf mist.
Yeah, surf mist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So wind spray, things like that are a little bit less reflective. But yeah, look, it's one of those things. I think the greater good is that having the lighter coloured roofs, I think the proof's pretty much there that it's a much better outcome. So
I think I'd be interested just to make a sort of an addition to this too, Gary, is that, you know, ultimately we've got to be considering where we're building. So the solution for Darwin is very different to the solution for Tasmania. I think we really need to be conscious about that. I mean, our main energy usage here is in heating. So, you know, we should be looking for ways to, you know, capture that heat. And I think that's ultimately an idea of a gradient across Australia might make more sense with the roofs, and we need to take into consideration the local environment of each particular site for those kinds of decisions. I think it's wrong to just go, no, we're only having, I've been in places that have, you know, had the DCP say we're only having white coloured roofs here, and looked out over the top of them all, and yes, you need sunglasses, and then others they're black and too hot. So I think we really do need to be quite conscious about the locality and the site analysis that goes alongside those decisions.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
The human choice, the variability is pretty key there in that one too, just to add with the colour, because you can have a thing called the urban heat island effect, where you've got a bunch of dark ones all in that area, and you'll find that that's why cities will have that increased average temperature. And yeah, so it's, you know, probably a good thing to be able to choose your own colours, isn't it?
Thank you. So anyone that's joined us this evening, if you did have any questions, feel free to send them through on the chat. I will just jump back to two others that we got on the ticket registration. So Gary, you alluded to grey water in developments before. So one of the questions was options for environment-friendly, economical, sustainable septic systems and grey water systems. Would anyone like to jump in there? I know Deb's had some experience with finding and exploring different systems lately, so even feel free yourself.
I'm not so we're looking at doing a build at the moment. We're using Blue and Grey Water, who are the only people we've found in the Shire who can provide the OSS and the on-site sewage system management that does the grey water sort of splitting. So it's an aerated septic system that does the grey water splitting. It's certainly not a cheap option, and I think when the Off-Grid Living Festival had some really interesting speakers around wastewater management and grey water management, and one of the big issues was whether it was council compliant or not, but there were a whole lot of very economical solutions that were very safe and could be put in place, but really struggled to meet council regulations, and that mostly waste management, to do waste management well and sustainably and in an environmentally sensitive way that was compliant was often quite expensive. So I don't know how helpful I can be on that. Does anybody else? Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I'll follow on from that. A few years ago I did the sustainability design course, and we did a sort of whole day on grey water, and a lot of that was based on research done by Renew magazine. And what they were saying was that to do grey water recycling effectively in a suburban situation, it's quite expensive. It's disproportionately expensive versus just trying to capture rainwater. So maybe there is a more logical solution that, like Gary was saying, that's actually at a subdivision level, where maybe you have a third. You know, you maybe it goes to a more central situation where then it's more cost effective to manage it, and it's used to, I don't know, water grass or grow something in part of the subdivision.
Wetland.
A wetland, yeah. So you know, which grows willow, which you then, oh no, willow's not.
It's the situation I'm in at the moment, which is an acreage, a reed bed solution would be really affordable, really doable, but it just wasn't an option that we were that would be considered when we did the subdivision.
Why was that not considered? Sorry, so
I don't know. It was rejected. We put in we didn't apply for the reed bed because it was rejected just at the consultation stage. That's not something that would be passed.
We do have,
which made me very sad.
Yeah, we do have a I don't know if you can call Tillinga a township, but Tillinga's it is a township. I'll give it that. It is serviced by a reed bed there. I'm not sure, Gary, if you can speak to that. That may be more water. Yeah. So the township of Tillinga is serviced by a reed bed for their wastewater. I believe at your place it may have something to do with the water table.
It was just any subject. It wasn't.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. We didn't even get to that discussion.
Okay,
it just wasn't. It wasn't an acceptable.
There is a bit of I've got some experience in wastewater approvals and stuff. When I worked at council, I did the wastewater approvals for different rural developments in Eurobodalla and those sort of things. And I have a bit of an idea of the history of it. And reed beds were a new septic system or something like that needs to be approved by the Department of Health. And so they have to be certified and all those things. And that becomes the mass-produced septic tank or something like that. But if someone wanted to build one out of cement block or out of brick, they could do that, but then it's a site-specific approval that council would use. And a lot of manufacturers started to put in reed beds and get them approved through the Department of Health at one stage. And the Department of Health have stood back from that and said these are more disposal systems that should be the site-specific approvals. But councils around Australia get confused with that. If it's not a standard design that's approved by the Department of Health, they're reluctant to look at the skills and things to do a site-specific approval. But the legislation's set up to allow for site-specific approvals for things constructed on the site. So a reed bed is one of those that it's more efficient to construct it on the site than it is to have a mass-produced aerobic tank that has a pump in it and those sort of things. So they're possible, but where there's issues getting them approved, it's easier to go with something else probably. Yeah.
I may also just jump in here and clarify because you know, I think there is some confusion, and this is something that I've been looking into in my role because it's actually part of the climate action plan, is to explore and advocate to the New South Wales government for you know, reuse and recycle of grey water. So as it stands now, as long as you have a diversion system on your grey water, you can actually use it on your gardens. And then it's only when you want to store it on your property that you need to have treatment. And that what Paul was talking about before, that needs to be approved by the New South Wales Health.
Well,
So
it needs to be approved by council,
yes.
and they use the Department of Health's list of approved systems to do those approvals, but they can do site-specific approvals, yeah. But that's more for rural blocks. It'd be hard to do one on a small block.
Yeah, in town. Yeah. Were there other questions that came through, Alex?
There was one last one, which and I just want to preface as well, these particularly about the grey water reuse and the next question. These are topics that we're going to explore further in different sessions as well. But just a simple one: suppliers of heat pumps and solar panels, please. So I have been doing a little bit of research about solar pumps, heat pumps, and you know, because I keep on seeing those advertisements pop up online of, you know, swap out your old gas or electric inefficient hot water system for $80 or whatnot. So all I'm going to say to this is please use your discernment when interacting with those kind of advertisements. You know, it's always best to go and chat to someone locally. And those kind of rebate systems aren't fully managed and you know, what is it called, like vetted by the body who is issuing those rebates. And so there's a lot of, you know, subpar products being imported from overseas that, you know, when they are installed on your property cannot be serviced by local electricians or what, you know, service people. So using a local supplier, there's many around, all of the Solar Hub, Solar Heart. If anyone else can recommend someone who...
Anya Solar.
Yeah.
Anya Solar, they're a local Maria. Well,
beautiful, thank you.
Micro Energy Systems, MESA, they did ours, they were really good.
They're in Bodalla.
And with a heat pump, we actually got a Sandon heat pump, and it's been absolutely awesome. It's been brilliant. Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Awesome. All right, I think is that all of our questions
yes
that we've had?
And it's 6:30, so how good are we?
Just absolutely brilliant.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming on. This is so juicy, so many juicy bits, and will be a great resource for for our residents and community and businesses and friends alike. So
And hopefully this is just the start. I feel like there's just so many more discussions that the sustainability community in Eurobodalla need to be having, and hopefully we can look at developing forums where we can continue these discussions, either, you know, informally, in home visits and one-on-one and down the pub occasionally, but also in more formal forums like this. Let's hope that we can keep moving with this.
Beautiful. Well,
Thanks,
Wani.
Debbie.
Thank you. I think it's great that the council's taking a bit of a leadership role in this, because I think it's really got to come from there. So I think well done. That's excellent that you've done this.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Goodbye.
Well, Awani all.
Well, Wani. Bye.
Bye.